Generative AI always wants to try to solve the problem, and this leads to hallucination. We've all heard about hallucination. This is when it tries to come up with an answer that fits. It may look really convincing, but maybe it's not factually accurate. And often the cause of hallucination is that the generative AI does not have the information that it needs in order to accurately solve the problem or answer or whatever it is. So one thing that's really, really important when we're building a custom GPT, particularly if we want it to be factually accurate, but also if we just want it to be better at solving problems or more creative and inspirational, is we need to make sure it has enough information to do a good job. So we always want the information to come before the problem solving, because if we attempt to solve the problem without getting the information first, what we're going to do is either be at risk of hallucination or we're going to be at risk of just producing a poor answer that isn't exciting or isn't very good. And so there's a number of different ways that we can do this. One, we can do things like we've seen. We can give the custom GPT documents, but often we have to think about collecting other types of information, and it's helpful to just sort of quickly think through some of those. What are some things that we may want to collect from the user? Context about the problem. Like often the user may go and describe the problem, but they may not describe the full scope, of where the problem is occurring. So we need to make sure that we've collected enough information. The answer can vary dramatically depending on, the context in which the problem is occurring, and we want to make sure we really, really have enough information about it. So the answer of, can I take first-class travel at Vanderbilt, depends on, for example, do you have a medical reason to do that? Is there some emergency? There's all kinds of other contextual things that could matter. Another thing is user preferences. This is something that we don't normally think about, but we're interacting with a user and we want to do things that are exciting to them, that are helpful to them, that fit their learning style, that fit their desired interaction model. And so we want to collect that information and think about it. And that is information that needs to go into the context and be explicitly stated. We can have all kinds of other things. Some other interesting ones are past interactions. So often what we will see is interactions in the conversation. It's basically a history of our interactions with the user, but sometimes the solving of the problem requires knowing things outside of the current conversation. For example, the answer of can I get reimbursed for first-class travel? If you previously asked your financial unit manager at Vanderbilt and they said, no, you cannot in this context, and you go into the bot and you don't provide that information, that's a critical piece of missing context, that they have interacted either with the bot previously or they interacted with a financial unit manager. So that's really, really important as well. There's all kinds of other things. Another one is the desired outcome. What do you want the answer to be like? Do you want it to be short and concise? Do you want it to be verbose? Do you want a list of quotations? So all of these things are important to think about of the types of information we want to collect, but there's lots and lots of other things. But the critical thing is we need to make sure that we collect and have enough information in the context of the conversation to solve the problem effectively. Do not jump in and make assumptions or ask it to quickly start doing something until you have the information. And often we'll need to explicitly tell the custom GPT, make sure that you have enough information. Don't jump the gun. Don't assume anything. Don't do any of these things. We want to tell it, collect the information first. And sometimes what we need to do is say, not only collect the information, but restate it, make it very explicit, make the user agree that that is correct, and only then attempt to solve the problem. An incredibly useful prompt pattern to know when you're building custom GPTs is the flipped interaction pattern. So what is this pattern? Well, we think about telling ChatGPT what to do, we think about asking it questions, but one of the most powerful things that we can do is we can ask it to ask us questions. So we can tell it, go and ask me questions to help me achieve some goal that I'm looking for, but I don't want to direct giving you the information. I want you to elicit the information that you need from me. Now, this can be really powerful in a number of different contexts. One context where it's really, really powerful is the user doesn't know what information they need to give it. So they don't know what information is going to be useful in solving the problem. And so they want to rely on the domain knowledge of ChatGPT to help go and ask the right questions and sort of adaptively navigate through the questioning space in order to build up context to then solve the problem. So this is a really, really powerful area to use it is particularly whenever you have a user who may not have a full picture of what's going on, they may not have the process, other types of things, which often that is the case with a custom GPT, is we're trying to help the user solve some problem, but they may not be a complete domain expert. They may not have all the knowledge, the process, other things. And so we can tell a custom GPT to go and ask the user questions. Now, I'm going to give you a simple example outside of a custom GPT. So I'm going to use the flipped interaction pattern, which is basically ask me questions until some goal is achieved. So ask me questions until you have enough information to create a recipe that I will like, and then I'm going to tell it. Optionally, you can say how many questions to ask at a time. This can often be useful because sometimes it'll like to overwhelm the user with questions. So in this case, I'm going to say ask the questions one at a time, and then I'm going to use a little trick. Often you need to tell it, ask me the first question, sort of trigger it in the right direction. So I've built up a prompt here using the flipped interaction pattern. I'm going to have it ask me questions in order to create a recipe for me. Okay, what are your favorite types of dish or cuisine that you enjoy? And I go say, okay, I'd like, Tex-Mex. I love a lot of different cuisines. I'm just going to go with Tex-Mex for now. What are some of your preferred ingredients or flavors? I'm going to say, well, let's go with refried beans, ribeye, and avocado. Do you prefer Tex-Mex dishes to be spicy, mild? And it goes through asking me questions one at a time. And you notice it keeps going until it thinks it has enough information to generate a recipe for me. Notice I didn't ever say, stop and generate the recipe. I just gave it that goal at the beginning. I said, until you have enough information to create a recipe that I will like. So it is deciding when it thinks it has enough information. I am not dictating to it or telling it when. Now, I could have stopped probably at some point in the conversation and just said, go generate the recipe and figure it out, but I'm not doing that here. Now, one thing that's interesting about this, and something that I think is a really powerful thing to know, is if you're going through this questioning process and you do get to a point where you get a little like, hey, I don't want to ask any more questions, just tell it to choose the rest. And kind of what you're basically saying is, I've given you a bunch of information, I'm not sure about the rest, or I don't care. You fill in the blanks for me at this point with what you need, and now it goes and creates the recipe. But what I did not do is go step by step and say, I like this, I like this, I like this, I like this, now generate the recipe. What we did is the opposite. It said, what about this, what about this, what about this? It asked us all the questions, and then it decided to generate the recipe. This is a really, really useful pattern. Getting ChatGPT or your custom GPT to ask you or the user of your custom GPT questions in order to collect information or contextual information that is needed in order to reason more effectively, solve some problem, build a better experience, and we'll see some simple ways that we can use this to do really powerful things with our custom GPTs. Context is critically important to writing really good custom GPTs and having them be able to effectively help human beings. But one of the pieces of context that's often missing is who the user is that's interacting with the GPT, and either what they're interested in or what their role is. All kinds of information about the user can be critical. So how do you figure out that information and get it to the GPT? There's a variety of different approaches, but I'm going to show you a really simple approach, and I'm going to give you a scenario where this matters. Now, I built an updated version of the Travel Policy GPT for Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt has just introduced a new policy. They have decided that because of various technical reasons, they no longer want to reimburse Vanderbilt computer science faculty for in-flight Wi-Fi purchases. So now, how do we build a custom GPT that can effectively reason about this? Now, in this example that we can see right here, I've got two policy documents. I've got the original policy document, which we see the travel and business expense policy, and then this weirdly named document is this new policy that Vanderbilt has just put out, where CS faculty at Vanderbilt are no longer allowed to pay for Wi-Fi and get reimbursed for it. So now we have a problem, right? Because if we want to answer the question, can I get reimbursed for Wi-Fi, we have to know who the user is. So how are we going to solve this problem? The way we solve it is with the flipped interaction pattern. And the idea behind this is we ask ChatGPT or GPT-4 basically to go and ask us questions in order to elicit information. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to instruct the custom GPT to go and ask the user questions about their role and who they are first in order to determine what they are or who they are, and basically are they a CS faculty or not. And once it figures that out, it'll be able to appropriately answer questions. So the way we do this is we tell it, you're going to help Vanderbilt employees answer travel and business expense questions. Now, I add an important change to this custom GPT. I say always, and notice I've got it in all caps. Now, this may or may not always make a difference, but sometimes it can. So always start by asking the user about their job, role, etc. in order to customize the answers. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that the first thing that happens is that we elicit information about who the user is. And then I tell it, and make sure, and make them more tailored in language and circumstances. And then this is really critical. Only after figuring out the user and role should you try to answer. So I'm telling it, first you're going to do this, only then are you going to attempt to answer. This is really critical. Always start by asking who the user is, and only once you know that information in order to customize the answers are you going to attempt to answer. And then I tell it, use the provided documents to answer questions. Now, the really important part is I tell it, always start by asking the user about their job, role, etc. I'm using a flipped interaction pattern to go and elicit information from the user so that I have the information I need for decision making. Now, I'm going to show you this in action with a separate conversation. So now I'm going to ask it, can I get reimbursed for in-flight Wi-Fi? And it says, before I can give you an accurate answer about in-flight Wi-Fi and reimbursement, could you please let me know your department or role at Vanderbilt? So now, rather than jumping straight into the question and the answer, instead it's jumping into, let me find out about the user so that I can gather contextual information that I need to make the appropriate decision. And then I say, I'm a professor in CS, and it tells me, thank you for sharing this information. As a computer science faculty member at Vanderbilt, the policy specifically states that in-flight Wi-Fi expenses are not eligible for reimbursement. So it's gone through and it's first asked me who I am, found out my role, and then it answers the question. So this is what we told it to do. If we go back and we do it again, we say, can I get reimbursed for in-flight Wi-Fi? It asks us our role again. Before providing, could you please tell me more about your position at Vanderbilt? I say, I am a professor in French. And now it says, thank you for sharing this, and basically says that it is an allowable expense. So it's changed what it's saying because it's gathered context. Now note, if we don't give it the context, if we don't have it ask the user who they are and what they do and what their role is, or collect whatever else we need to know about the user, it will not be able to accurately answer. Now this can be really important in all kinds of situations. If you're dealing with HR, often benefits, contracts, all kinds of things are dependent upon the user's role. All kinds of policies are role dependent. All kinds of things really, really matter who the user is. Or if you're trying to customize education, you're going to have a quiz bot. Well, you may need to know the grade level of the person. You may need to know all kinds of other information. Have they completed certain trainings yet? And all of that is often something that you need to go and ask the user for. Now, sometimes you may be able to figure out another way to go and achieve this effect, go and log the user in, pull from some type of database, but in many cases, you're not going to be able to do that easily. So a simple solution to this is to use the flipped interaction pattern to stop and ask the user questions about who they are and their role first in order to then be able to go and accurately answer the question. Just like software, we can create custom GPTs that have lots of different features that we can enable or disable, or that can be customized to the preferences of the users. So I'm going to give you a really simple example of how we can use this idea of customization and features to build a more useful custom GPT. Again, we're going to be using the flipped interaction pattern to ask questions to the user to elicit information about their preferences, and then we're going to go and answer questions. So in this version of the GPT, what I've done is I've taken the travel and expense policy custom GPT, and I've said at the end of the response, you can automatically generate a FAQ entry or frequently asked questions entry for the question that was asked and the official answer that you gave. So the idea would be that if you have somebody who's using this in a support role, let's say they're going, and they may not always know the answer to user questions, but they're then going and fielding them with the bot and then answering the users, they might want to create a FAQ entry and go post it on a website somewhere or something like that, so that as you're going and basically fielding questions, you can go and build up an FAQ or a frequently asked questions list. Now, for some users, this may not make sense, or they may not want this. Like, we may not always want to have this FAQ feature enabled, so we'd like to be able to turn it off or on depending on the user's preference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say always start by asking the user if they'd like to enable the FAQ feature. Only after figuring out if the user wants to enable the FAQ feature should you try to answer. So I'm creating this special feature. At the end of a question, it can create an FAQ or FAQ entry, and then the user can decide at the beginning of the conversation if they want to enable or disable that. Now, it could also be something like you're going to generate trivia questions, and the starting point is asking the user, what do you want to generate trivia questions on? Or it might be asking the user about, like, tell me some things that you love doing, and then you're going to quiz them on a totally different topic, but you're going to use concepts that are explained in terms of topics that the user cares about. You can do all kinds of different things. In this case, we're going to basically be enabling and disabling a feature. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch over here to a conversation now that's using this feature. So I went and I asked, can I get reimbursed for renting a bulldozer for my research? And it says, before I answer your question, would you like to enable the FAQ feature? So the first thing it does is ask me to customize the experience. What features do I want to enable? What options? What types of things do I want to do with it? It makes it more useful and flexible. And I say, yes, I would like to enable that feature. Then it goes through and it answers the question automatically, which is what it was supposed to do. And at the end of it now, it creates the FAQ entry. So it says, can I get reimbursed for renting bulldozer for my research? And it gives the official FAQ entry answer that should go into the FAQ. Now, if I want to go back and do it, and I don't want to have all that because it isn't relevant to me. If I go and I say the exact same question, can I get reimbursed for renting a bulldozer for my research? It says to provide the most accurate information, I can check the Vanderbilt business expense policy for you. Would you like me to enable the FAQ feature? So now it's asking me again, it's asking a slightly different order, but it's still asking it. I tell it no, it answers the question again, and I don't get the FAQ answer, which when in this version of it, I did get it. And so this is a really simple thing that we can do is we can start building in features, options, customization, personalization for the user. And at the very beginning, we can ask them what they want. What features should it turn on? What should it do or not do? And we make it explicit by using the flipped interaction pattern to go and collect that information right from the beginning for the user or just in time, right when we need it.